Bloodmoon Huntress gives us a very incisive and very haunting idea of how Rayla got it into her mindset that this was a noble and just and dutiful thing to do. That is honestly as terrifying as the Bloodmoon Huntress herself. The information we receive about Rayla's past and the factors that helped shape her into the conflicted, self-loathing, existentially anguished teenager that she is by the events of the show, these parts of her past are not absolutely necessary for us to know the full story of the Dragon Prince saga in the same way that, say, Through the Moon is, as that ends with Callum and Rayla breaking up, with Rayla running off by herself on a steadfast mission to kill Viren. That is going to matter for Season 4. The events of Bloodmoon Huntress are not like that, in that they do not have as significant a bearing on Rayla's future, but they very much do have a bearing on her past, on the flaws and limitations of the people who raised her, however well-meaning they are. The horror in the book is delightfully spooky and macabre in the Halloween sense, but it is ultimately defeated. The much larger and more thematically significant occurrence that happens in Bloodmoon Huntress, however, is Rayla's gradual but steady inculcation into the life of an assassin. Runan, defending himself and his profession, creates for Rayla a perhaps romanticized view of what being an assassin is and what it means. He talks about the necessity of doing a lot of ostensibly horrible actions in order to preserve justice and peace. And there is, in fact, a place for that. I don't think the Dragon Prince would have us say that these kinds of moral compromises are never worthwhile, but they can very easily be abused because actual political and socio-economic, historical situations are not as black and white as Runan implies that they are. Rayla, thus, views being an assassin as a matter of pride by the end of this book. She views it as a matter of becoming an adult and performing her duty for the benefit of the elves. All of these ideas that Runan, without really trying to, ends up planting in her head by the end of this book, especially combined with what her parents say to her in this book, cause her to devote herself intently to the path of being an assassin, even though doing so is against her natural compassion and desire to work out circumstances more peacefully. She becomes more withdrawn, more unwilling to think outside the ideas and strictures and mores imposed by this prioritization of duty in the culture of the Moonshadow elves. Runan is a more complicated character, of course, than a mere proponent of violence and death. He does not like his job. It is not easy for him, and I appreciate how his character is given a lot more shading than in the base show itself, wherein he is this very determined, very unyielding person who prizes devotion to duty, to order, to the complete eradication of those he believes are an enemy of that order above all else. This is not an entirely inaccurate view of Runan's rather rigid philosophical perspective, but emotionally and psychologically, he's more torn. He's tortured by what he does, even though he believes it's necessary. And it's reasonable, even though Rayla doesn't quite understand at this point, that neither he nor Athari really want Rayla to follow him on that path of being an assassin. Yet Rayla feels impotent. She feels weak and powerless. She can't stop her parents from leaving to go defend the egg of the dragon. As importantly, if not more so to her, she can't convince them to allow her to come with them, even though she believes it's important, because that's what they have said to her. They are conveying to her that this is more important even than them spending time with her. Even if they don't say that explicitly, that's what their actions say. So Rayla reasons that if it's that important, she should get to come along with them and try to help them. But they don't want her hurt, and they imply that she's a kid who needs to grow up. So when Rayla is allowed more freedom and more responsibility by Athari and Runan, she feels more grown up. She feels that sense of control that her parents' departure has wrested away from her. But while we can sympathize with Rayla's desire to step wholeheartedly into the role of an assassin, this is ultimately not a role that is beneficial to her basic existential sense of self. It requires her to devote herself coldly and mercilessly to violence when that is the last thing she wants for herself. Aside from Athari, who is as patient and caring as ever, it really does seem like Rayla has a shortage of role models. It's not that Lane, Teodrin, and Runan don't do their best, or that they don't care about her. They really do want what's best for her. Nonetheless, they prioritize this sense of duty above all other obligations, because that is in line with the values and beliefs of the Moonshadow elves. There are positives to this devotion to duty, as it prevents a sense of community and common-spiritedness above mere individual pride and caprices. But the problem with this ideal of duty and devotion is that it's too limited, and it leads to this being the last time that Rayla's parents ever see her. They believe in duty, and they end up in coins. Runan believes in duty, and he ends up in a coin. Rayla, following their lead, believes wholeheartedly in it as well, and it leads to her becoming reflexively cynical and embittered. It leads to her sense of self being fissured until she's able to slowly create a new sense of self that is in line with the values she actually holds throughout the Dragon Prince. I once believed that the Bloodmoon Huntress graphic novel took place after Rayla's parents were proclaimed traitors. I believe I said something to that extent when I made my last video on the Bloodmoon Huntress graphic novel, and I was wrong. I apologize. But that this is not the case honestly makes the circumstances in which Rayla is raised, the environment in which she grows up, develops a sense of the morals she should hold, even more disquieting, because this is normal. This is not a result of the shock caused by her parents becoming traitors and cowards by the standards of elven society. But rather, it is a distressingly normal depiction of the values and priorities inculcated by elven values. Even before her parents end up being trapped in coins by Viren, they openly admit that they could be gone for years, even if their mission went well. That is a good option in their minds. That they might miss some of the most important years of the life of their only daughter because of the mission that they're required to do for the protection of the dragon. Rayla's parents are not wholeheartedly devoted to their ideal of duty, at least not so much so that they can't see the negative after effects that this would have on Rayla. But ultimately, they overcome these scruples and decide to prioritize duty anyway, leaving Rayla to be raised by Runan and Athari. I do not wish to speak ill about Runan, who is much more nuanced, it seems, than the image a lot of people in the fandom have of him. But he is not the best person to provide Rayla what she needs. He is not the best person to help cultivate in her a healthy sense of her identity and her own values and beliefs and ideals. I do not wish to excuse Viren's actions, but Viren's actions only deprived Rayla of all the people she cares about the most, because those people chose to put themselves first and foremost in the line of duty, fulfilling what the elves said that they should be doing, that protecting the dragons, especially in the case of Rayla's parents, is the foremost duty that must be fulfilled. And that Viren and the humans on his side are not just foes, but the ultimate evil who must be stopped at all costs. They are all lost to Rayla because of Viren, but also because they chose to put themselves into situations wherein such a bad outcome was a possibility, because they had internalized the elven mores that prioritize duty above all else, thus leaving Rayla alone. She always had to carry around the knowledge that she was not what was most important, even to her parents, even to Runan. They were caring, thoughtful, and tender-hearted people. They really did want to do right by her, but ultimately, they, as was dictated by the values of the Moonshadow elves, prioritized duty above all else, even her. Callum is probably the first person she has met who prioritizes her above everything else. And he doesn't have to. He's not related to her. He's not her parents. He's not someone who has the duty to take care of her like Runan. He just loves her and wants what's best for her in a very simple, almost naive way that is nonetheless overpowering and captivating to Rayla, because it is completely against all the values and convictions of the society in which she has been raised. If Callum has to choose between her and an abstract duty, he would choose her without even thinking. Rayla needs that in her life because it's something that she's been deprived of, and we see the process by which that deprivation warps her identity in Bloodmoon Huntress. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this before everyone else. Keep watching The Dragon Prince. We'll be getting a new season by the end of the year. Read Bloodmoon Huntress if you haven't. I made the book sound a lot more existentially horrifying than I think a lot of people will find it. It certainly is one of those books where a lot of the more negative implications are in retrospect, since we know the effect that the values espoused by Rayla's parents and Runan had on Rayla. The actual conflict with the Huntress herself is quite easily resolved. Anyway, tune in soon for next analysis. It will be coming soon. Promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.